Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. My name is Shravan. I am VP of Engineering here at Clari. And today we're going to talk about how we do customer bug management or defect management at Clari. What will you get out of this talk today? Well, a playbook, sort of. It's a playbook for scaling your customer defect and your bug management processes in an enterprise SaaS setting. Hopefully, you will have one of these reactions after this talk. Well, maybe it makes sense. Maybe it's the best talk ever, or something in between. There's one thing that you know about me, my ex-colleagues would know, my colleagues would know, is I love GIFs. Some people call it GIFs. So quick show of hands. How many people call it GIFs? What about GIFs? OK, GIFs win. Argument closed. But that's what you'll have today in the presentation, lots of GIFs. A little bit about me. About 20 years of experience in the industry across many verticals, companies of many different sizes. I live in the Bay Area with my wife. She's a fellow engineering leader herself. She is awesome. And I have 10-year-old twin boys. And my strengths, I'm a clumsy human. So I'm known to chop my nails. I have broken my toes a few times. If I fall off the stage today, that will not be far-fetched. In terms of my weaknesses, I love boba. Who loves boba here? OK, half the crowd. So let me explain what Clari does. So revenue is the most important process any company has, irrespective of the industry that you're in or the vertical that you're in. Revenue is not just an outcome that companies measure at the end of the quarter or end of the fiscal year. Just like in software development, we ship a piece of product on a particular date, or we ship a feature on a particular date. But you all know the process that goes behind the scenes to build that software, from building the product strategy, building the requirements, coming up with the tech design, coding, testing, rollout, so on and so forth. So in enterprise selling motions is the exact same thing. Every day, every week, every quarter, your sales team is working incredibly hard to make that revenue happen for the company. So traditionally, we have a three-headed hydra. Spreadsheets, our #1 used software in the world, custom BI solutions, and CRM systems. And sales ops and revenue operationals folks in enterprise SaaS companies use a combination of these three tools to run revenue processes. So this system has been decades old, like 30 years old. So what we are trying to do at Clari is build the world's first and only unified revenue platform where revenue-critical employees can collaborate and govern the entire end-to-end life cycle of revenue in one place. So a little bit about Clari again. We have about 1,500 customers. We are a Series F company, so that in relation to the scale that we have. We have about $2 trillion under management, 750 employees, 300 in PDE, product design engineering. We call that as one unit. Some companies call it EPD, 3 legs in a stool. We call it PDE. We think of them as one combined organization. We have 35 plus teams within PDE and 3 locations across North America, India, and Poland. So over the past couple of years, we are transitioning from a single product organization to a multi-product organization. So we have scaled from 1 product to 4 products in the last 2 years. We acquired 3 companies along the way. So when you acquire companies along the way, their processes are quite different from Clari's own processes. So how do you merge this together in a way that makes sense for the customer and for their benefit? So not too long ago, this is the reaction that we were dealing with. How do we get a true handle of incoming customer defects? Our existing processes were showing cracks. And honestly, internal teams and customers were getting frustrated with the resolution that we had at Clari. So some of the issues that we were dealing with, enterprise escalations. We are an enterprise SaaS company. Like, our product is used at the highest levels of management in tech companies and beyond. So think about your C-level suite, your board members. So when those customers have a pain point with Clari, those escalations get triaged very, very quickly inside Clari. And It disrupts the team's priorities for the day, for the sprint. And honestly, in many cases, there were escalations that should not have been escalations in the first place. Also, we had very unclear expectations between our internal teams and our customers on when these defects or bugs would be resolved. Is it 10 days? Is it 90 days? Is it a year? Because that was unwritten to the customer. The other thing is we had many, many, many sources of truth for customer defects inside our Jira instance. So we had a very tough handle on where is the source for customer bugs. The last thing, the current process that we had about a year ago was extremely time-consuming and manual. And about 100 plus unique items that we had collected through survey and key stakeholder feedback. So what did we do? How did we solve it? Did we redesign our process from the ground up? Did we just iterate on what we had? That's the focus of this presentation over the next 20 minutes. So, as I often talk about in presentation land, I only will talk in rules of 3 or 5. So 3 rules here. First thing we did was we got cross-functional. We formed a working group across our customer support, go-to-market, and PD leadership team to really get a deep handle on this problem. Your partners in support are probably the most important partners because they are the first and last line of defense in between your internal teams and the customers. So it's really, really important to build a very strong partnership with that team. The second thing, get a baseline. We documented the current state by going broad with a survey and by going deep with about 30 stakeholder interviews over a course of a month. And the next thing is we aligned as a working group, what is the future state? Like we knew we have 1 product to 4, we'll have many more down the road. So how does this process scale over time and how do we make it future-proof? So we aligned on the high-level state for our future. And this is the #1 goal that we were shooting for, is how do you optimize the customer defect process to have a simple, consistent, and predictable customer experience across all our products. I'll repeat that again, simple, consistent, and predictable. So here are the 5 steps that we followed to completely redesign this process from the ground up. We launched this process about 7 months ago. So these are like real learnings from that experience. And we'll talk about each of these items in detail. So the first thing we did is we streamlined the intake process from our customers into PDE, or product design engineering. In a typical enterprise SaaS company, you have these go-to-market functions. There's professional services, sales engineering, account management, customer success, who are all responsible for the value that they provide to the customers. Unfortunately for us, the way the bugs were being directed into PDE came in through many, many different channels. Emails, Salesforce cases, Jira tickets. I love Slack, but Slack DMs, Slack channels. It just got overwhelming to see constant pings about customer bugs that came through these various channels into PDE. So the other thing for us is, as I mentioned, like our software is used at the highest levels of management in any company. So when that is the case, there are emails from the chief revenue officer to our CEO, from our CEO to internal teams, and this just causes chaos. So what did we do? Well, our #1 goal was to simplify. So we simplified it. We drastically reduced the intake of the intake process, where everything from the customers and the go-to-market teams would flow into our technical support, which is responsible for level 1 and level 2 support inside the company. And if technical support realized that they needed engineering help to further triage and resolve the issue, they would create a Jira ticket for the engineering team. One of the great things about this was, data-wise, 95% of the cases that came into technical support never made it to engineering after this change. So only 5% of all customer cases came into engineering. So that was a big win for us. We reduced the number of disruptions that we had from customers and go-to-market teams into PDE. So for PDE, Jira was the source of truth. For our go-to-market teams and for the customers, our Salesforce Service Cloud instance was the source of truth. The next thing, step number 2, was aligning on bug prioritization and SLOs. So service level objectives, not SLAs, but SLOs. In the past, we used a combination of many fields. We had priority, severity, we had custom labels. Unfortunately, we had way too many permutations and combinations to truly understand the priority of a defect. So what we do again, simplify. We used a single field, not surprisingly, it's called priority, to determine the priority of the ticket. So think of priority as a calculated field with inputs and weights. What is the customer impact? How much is the customer paying us? Is it a $1 million ARR customer? Is it a $50,000 ARR customer? Do they have a platinum or a gold or a premium support package that they have bought from Clari, which may demand higher or faster resolution times? Is this a C-level escalation? What if we do not fix this bug? Does this increase the risk of churn for this enterprise customer? Is this a new implementation? Is this an existing customer? And security and compliance. So think of this as just a calculated field that came into play to determine the priority of a given ticket. Next thing we did is we aligned on 2 internal service level objectives: time to acknowledge and time to resolution. So time to acknowledge is pretty straightforward. It's the moment where the ticket was first created by the technical support team, and the moment when it was first reviewed by the PDE team. So the technical support team would decide the initial priority of the ticket, but the ultimate decision on the priority of the ticket would be handled by the product owner or the product manager of the PDE team. At that moment in time, it's also very important for us to say, hey, do we have all the information that we need to actually work on this ticket given a chance? Second thing, time to resolution. That is the time when the ticket was first created and ticket was closed. That is pretty straightforward. So the next thing we did was we mapped priority to SLO targets. So we created 5 priorities for all of our customer defects, P0 to P4. P0 is a special one. I'll talk about that a bit later. But we said for all of them, we're going to map the priority to the targets. So as an example, for P1, the time to acknowledge could be 4 hours. So within 4 hours, from the moment the ticket was created, somebody within the PDE team needs to acknowledge that, hey, I got it, I agree with the priority, and I have all the information needed to solve it. Same thing with time to resolution. So P1 target was 5 business days for us. So when I mentioned P0, P0 was a special priority for us where that truly signified something is horribly wrong with our product. That can only be initiated by our PD teams and our support teams. So that when someone says, I have a P0 ticket, that automatically triggers our incident management processes, which is separate from our bug management processes. For P1 to P4, the simple explanation of that is P1 means escalated, P2 means prioritized, P3 means standard issue, and P4 is nice to fix. So when we laid down the priority, we really worked with our customer-facing teams and our engineering teams to identify the detailed criteria and the examples for all these different priorities when we rolled out the process. Third, step number 3, tooling and automation. We had heard in the survey and stakeholder feedback that the current process was too cumbersome and time-consuming. So what we do? First thing we did was we adopted a product from Atlassian. It's not your Jira, just standard Jira project. It's a capability in Jira called Jira Service Desk. Many of the IT teams within a company use a product like Jira Service Desk. So what that enabled us to do is we were able to use the default features of Jira Service Desk, like custom intake forms, so which means when you create a ticket, you can create many different kinds of forms based on your need for the use case. It had default capabilities for tracking your SLO metrics and lots of bells and whistles for reporting. So we created a single support Jira Service Desk project for all PDE teams. And we modified the team's existing Scrum boards to include these support tickets in the process. As I mentioned, like when we say bugs, it's not just application bugs or code bugs. Like Clari is one product where it's extremely configuration driven. There are issues that may only apply to just one customer. So in that situation, we have a lot of operational requests that come in apart from code bugs. So what we did is we created about, I would say, at the moment, about 8 separate intake forms where the values that you see on this form or the fields that you see on the form would vary depending on the request type the support team would select. The next thing we did was we used a combination of Slack, Zapier, Workado, and Jira automation to automate a bunch of things. As an example, we routed time-sensitive and critical alerts via Zapier into Slack, into various channels that the team was using. We also had bidirectional syncs between our Salesforce Service Cloud instance and our Jira instance to make sure that fields are in sync across each other. And we also used Jira automation to auto-populate a bunch of fields based on certain triggers that we wanted to set. So the automation was the key because we had heard from survey feedback the time-consuming process it would take to fill out these manual fields. Step number 4, reporting. We often talk about visibility as the prerequisite to getting to the stage of predictability. Think of that as a precursor. Visibility as a prerequisite to get to predictability. So our goal was to empower all the 35+ PDE teams at Clari to use our single source of truth customer defect dashboards, but also give them the ability to slice and dice the data any way they wanted to and have them create their own custom dashboards. So what we did is dashboards for everyone. Like we created 2 master dashboards. Think of them as like level 1 and level 2 dashboards with varying degree of detail. And think of all the widgets that you care about, right? From SLO summary, which means for the 2 SLOs that we care about, like time to acknowledge and time to resolution, what is the SLO over the past 4 weeks, over the past 3 months, over the past year? How are the SLOs trending over time? Same thing by open escalations. What is your burn down chart between the number of created bugs versus resolved? Is your backlog growing over time or not? So whatever widgets that you cared about as a PDE team, you could create your own custom dashboards through Jira Service Desk. But also we created 2 master dashboards for everyone to use. So we rolled out this process May of this year, about almost 7 months ago. Once we rolled out the process, it was extremely important for all of us to empower the teams to steer this process week over week. This is where most companies, when they roll out a new process, it fails. Because you have a lot of momentum in the first 2 months, the first 3 months, and then it just dies over time. So our goal was, how do you continue this momentum and really make this a self-sustaining effort going forward? So we are a revenue company. We often talk about this language of a 13-week cadence. So think about what you're going to do each day, each week, each quarter. So what we did is there are 2 meetings that we have every week. So there's a meeting between the go-to-market leads or the customer support leads and the product design engineering leads, where we look at the dashboards, we look at open escalations. We're always talking about how do you continuously improve on this process. The second thing is we also had this notion already in place, even before we had rolled out the process, where all the PMs and EMs from the 35 teams that we have in the company would actually meet on a weekly basis to steer their execution plans for the given quarter. So what we did is, as part of their roadmap execution, we added a section that they also had to address around quality and what exactly are they doing for quality in that given quarter. Finally, you'll see in week 13, there's a new concept called quality reviews. My boss often calls it the President's Club. But the goal of quality reviews is to identify quality trends with the teams that have the most amount of volume and pain. As an example, we ran about 6 quality reviews in the past month. And one of the teams noticed over the past quarter that 50% of all their capacity for the entire quarter was focused on just support tickets. I mean, if you're spending 50% of your time on support tickets as a team, that pretty much means you're not going to spend as much time on other run-the-business items or actually your roadmap execution for the quarter. One of the other teams, we found that of all the tickets that came in to their queue, only 6.5% of the tickets actually resulted in a code fix. I'm like, that's mind-boggling. Like, it's 6% out of 100. Some teams, it was closer to 25%. One more interesting stat that we found out from our team was 44% of all the tickets that came in to a team actually had to be moved to a different team, which means they spend all the time triaging those issues, and they realize this issue is not perhaps with an API that they own, it's actually owned by a different team, and now they have to move it to that team. So all of these data points are so interesting because now you can start to identify, wait, are there systematic patterns here at play that you have to invest back into the product lifecycle and perhaps make an enhancement or a support tool request or do something else in the next quarter? One more idea that we are currently experimenting in our thought process is some of the top enterprise companies in the world today have this concept of a customer-centric engineering team or a CCE team. Some companies call it special workaround and triage, a SWAT team, where it's a dedicated team in engineering that sits in between your level 1, level 2 support team on customer support and the rest of the PD teams within engineering. So this is an idea where, hey, this team can be responsible for the initial troubleshooting and triaging and debugging. These are engineers. They can look at the code. They can implement workaround and quick fixes as needed. And in many cases, if you're doing something by hand, it might be better to actually create an internal tool for that purpose. So for common requests, this team can also build internal tools. So we're currently experimenting with the idea of building and scaling out a CC team as we go from a single product company to a multi-product company. One last thing. Probably the most important step, irrespective of the process and the details that you have, is you need to have a clean backlog. We went through an extensive, I would call it debris cleanup of 5 years worth of Jira data, where we went through, had a very strict criteria around which bugs can remain open starting this date. And that is something that you will have to partner with your customer support team and your product managers on as you clean that backlog. Once you have a clean backlog, your telemetry becomes clean. You can actually rely on data to actually make those decisions. So at the moment, we have a pretty clean, healthy backlog that we're constantly trimming over time. So in summary, here are the 5 steps that we followed. We streamlined the intake, we aligned on the bug prioritization, we set up the tooling and automation, we reported on all the things, and we steered the plan proactively week over week. So this process was highly, highly tailored to meet the top 3 goals that we had for the future state. Keeping it simple, keeping it consistent, and keeping it predictable. So I think my only advice for anyone who is embarking or thinking about setting up a process like this in your own organization is think about the scale, think about how you can simplify it, think about like what are the goals that you want to optimize for, and really, really tailor the solutions towards the goals. Like for us, like this process may make 0 sense for you, or it may make 100% sense for you. So it's really, really dependent on the goals that you're optimizing for in your situation. So I'm hosting a roundtable at 3 p.m. if you all want to deep dive on this topic and geek out. Thank you so much for listening, and happy to take any questions.
That was super cool, Shravan, and very like insanely relatable to my team as well. I mean, we have like 20 to 30 engineers and a lot of customer support issues. Small enough team where we're talking to execs a good amount of time, issues coming from a ton of different teams and trying to need to triage them and all that. And we even had a process literally called quality review. Like, there's so many parallels. It was funny. Not the same exact way that it works, but Yeah, and I'd also love. I think one thing that I probably want to implement is the assigning a certain like P1, P0, P3 type thing, because sometimes I see when you don't have that, it's so unclear of like, okay, who's working on this? How should we stop what we're doing right now to be doing it, like just fix it right now, or can we wait a little bit? All that, and so it ends up getting lost in translation. So many good things, man.
I mean, especially if you don't define the priority levels and with examples and detailed criteria, everything just becomes an escalation at that moment in time.
Yeah,
Do not want escalations to be the norm in any organization.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's super relatable talk, man. So yeah, let's go to the questions. Let's see here. So we have this one. Which department should support roll up to? Do you think they should be independent, part of CS, and other?
I would say technical support level 1 and level 2 should flow into the customer support organization, because they are the primary interface between customers and the go-to-market teams. So in enterprise SaaS companies, I would say technical support level 1, level 2 should probably be in the CS org. There's a different question about when you think about like sustaining engineering or CCE engineering. I've seen organizations where that is sometimes under support or under engineering. So that really depends on what you're optimizing for.
Got it. Let's go to the next one. Would the CC dedicated team be sourced from PDE members, i.e. on a rotation or not? Yeah, so like would they be separate?
That's a great question. I think you might have to start off, this is our current thought process, is you really have to bootstrap the team with people who are the domain experts today at the organization. You just can't hire 5 engineers from the outside and expect them to be effective at the job when they don't have a lot of domain knowledge. So to bootstrap the team for the first 6, 12 months, you probably need some of your best engineers who have a firefighter sort of a mindset, who love digging into these problems with the unknowns, and have them be the seed to bootstrap the team.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, let's probably do one more. Let's do, how did you assign which engineers would work on bugs from support and which would work on roadmap initiatives?
Ooh. Okay. This may not work for everybody, but within most of my teams and actually Chris's teams, we have this concept of an engineer that goes on-call responsibilities for the entire sprint. So they're completely taken away from any of the roadmap delivery features for the quarter. So when they're on call for that sprint, they're looking at support issues, they're looking at telemetry and Datadog, New Relic, observability systems to make sure everything is functioning as needed for their use cases. So I would say it's typically the KDLO engineer on call, and everyone in the team rotates on basically a sprint by sprint basis.
Got it. Awesome. All right, let's go to our last question then that we're doing to all speakers. You know this one. I'm sure it's been, I think we're, so yeah, what is one book that you would recommend to the audience that has changed the way you work or live your life?
Okay, this is so cliche. We were talking about this before. So how many of you know Adam Grant? Okay, a few people. So Adam Grant is a professor at Wharton. He is a specialist in organizational psychology and behavior, and he's written like many books. So one of his first books was called Give and Take, and he categorized people in 3 categories: givers, takers, and matchers. And he goes really deep into the psychology of which class or which category of people actually thrive at a workplace. Full disclosure, from his research, givers are both at the top and at the bottom. Because sometimes when you're a giver, you burn out by giving out so much to the organization with nothing in return. But at the other extreme, there are traits for givers where they actually thrive at the very top compared to takers and matchers. So it's a great read to think about individual human psychology, but also thinking about, as a leader, how do you make up the team between givers, takers, and matchers, and what should that ratio be in any organization?
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. I haven't read it, but I'm going to check it out after this for sure. Awesome. Thank you so much, Shravan. Let's give it up for Shravan one more time.
Awesome.
Thanks, man.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, great job.
There you go.